Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Planet Zoo. We're back here in Arcadia and having another little visit to Old Town where we're going to finish off this train station here. You can see there's not much foot traffic coming through here right now, but we hope to rectify that when we get new habitats and stuff in. But before we do that, I want to build a nice simple train station for our farm district here. So let's dive into the speed build and we'll talk a little bit more as we continue our build. Now, the first thing I want to point out is that I'm actually building this away from the station, just to give myself a little bit more room, but you'll see these breeze blocks are kind of marking out where the track goes and where the station platform is, and that's just going to allow me to do my work and then move this whole building back into place where the actual train station is. So everything's measured out correctly, and I'm hoping this just is a nice smooth transition as we move it back into position. We're starting off with some black square shapes underneath my wood flooring, and that's just going to provide a little bit of a shadow so that I can leave some very slight gaps in the wooden floor here. We're going to colour this, and we're using variations, different lengths and sizes of timber from the base game, and this just gives me a nice little bit of variation to play around with. And when we come in to do the fine detailing here, we might actually colour the boards a little bit differently as well, so we've got like a mix of different colours, shapes and sizes on our timber. And I'm using red brick for this train station because I think it's a little bit of a change from just using the same European stonework all the time, but also maintains that classical look that I'm aiming for these areas that we're building in today. And we're going with red brick all the way along, like I said, and we're going to use some of the red brick arches now, and this is the back wall of our train station. We're then going to put in some plaster panels and sink them down, and the reason I'm doing this and not just using the 4-meter plaster shapes is the panels are a little bit thinner than the actual shapes themselves, and that allows me to create an extra dimension on this back wall. I really like the shadows that are created by those archways, and just adding that extra dimension to the build already helps it stand out a little bit more. Then put those fountains in, and we use these classical concrete pillars to really highlight the architecture of this building, which I really like. Once these are in place, we're then going to duplicate them and move them forward, and they're going to form up the foundation pillars for this build, and it's already starting to take shape. Now, I had thought about having them right next to the track, like you can see there, but I ended up taking them out because I thought it made it look a little bit too cramped. We're next going to put in our roof, and this is eventually going to be taken out once I've mapped out how I want the roof to look. And this took a little bit of time. I wasn't completely happy with it like initially. I wanted this center to have like a little bit of a different shaped roof, so it was kind of sticking out over the front of it, and it took a while to get this one right, but the main aim is to actually end up putting like a clock or some sort of fascia in the triangular roof piece that is sticking out facing us right now. And you can see there it's quite small, and I then had to change it and just remap it a little bit. So what we end up doing is adding another meter on either side, and once that was done it looked a lot better than it does right now. But it is starting to take shape. Once this is done, we'll take it out and then continue working on the foundational structure of the entire building. But for now, we're making some really nice strides in developing this bit here. And it's starting to come together. It's hitting the theme that I'm aiming for, and when it all gets finished off, it's going to look really nice. So we put in this brickwork here again. I wanted to give it a little bit of a plaster lining in the middle, but it didn't quite work out, so I just left it. Then we come in and we're using the twilight portcullis beams here just to create some supporting beams for our roof when we finally put it back in. I then wanted to recreate some of the posters that we've got in the other station in Old Town, so we brought in the TV screens and we gave them a nice timber frame, again using the twilight timber pieces. I started with these thinner ones, but they didn't quite work out, so I very quickly switched them to the thicker pieces and made a nice chunky frame for these posters. And they are there's no new posters being designed for this episode. We're just using the same ones that we've already got that basically contain the train timetables and the actual advertising hoardings for Old Town. Then I put a nice classical trim on here, and this is where I was starting to play around with maybe having a nice plaster backdrop for the actual the roof piece, as it heads up to that point, and it didn't work. I tried a multitude of different things, like making little circular structures that would kind of just create these like weird little bits of line work and stuff, but none of it worked, so I ended up just leaving it out and having that bare brick. We could actually put in some weathering effects on here as well using the decals, but I decided to just leave that for another day. Like I said, we're going to come back and we're going to do another detailing episode here to finish off this section, because while I'm away, I'm planning on releasing a couple of episodes so that you guys can see it. This is one of them, and just to keep you all entertained while I am on holiday, we're going to be doing a big multitude of habitats in one episode, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. But yes, we were putting in our timber framework here to support the roof, and it was a little bit finicky, but once it was all done and put into place, I think it looks really nice. This did take a little bit of time though, because I didn't realize that the wood was actually not on the perfect angle. So a lot of this was actually built on the world grid, but then when I started playing around with this, things just went a little bit awry. So here you can see us putting in our main timber frame for the rest of the building, and it doesn't quite match the roof pieces that are in the middle, but I didn't think that was too much of an issue, so I've just left it as it is. We then came in, and you can see there that timber is looking really good. The framework's looking really nice and detailed. There's also some lights that we've put in there, and we're going to recreate that effect in the front of the station. Now, I wanted this to be completely open, so our main kind of station where the train is going to go is nice and covered, but this area here, where the guests are going to be able to queue up and get access to the trains themselves, it's all going to be open, and we're going to make some nice little gardens and stuff that are going to go in here, some little planters and stuff that are going to line the queues. And I just needed to duplicate and recreate what I had on the inside just for the sake of uniformity. Then I used these concrete stone plinths to actually create the floor of this structure. Now, a lot of this is actually going to end up being hidden by the mulch that we're going to put in here to create our planters, but I thought for the sake of continuity, we'd need to put down at least a base layer of the concrete there. And also these little extras that kind of overhang, they look really good at first, but then I started to notice, especially on the sides here, you can really see the clipping. So we came in with these the European coins, and they are basically going to line our actual exterior of the station here. And once we actually get the ramps going up into here, it looks a little bit strange. I'm not too keen on the actual ramping that we've got put in place, so I may come back and just re-edit the path, just so that it forms steps, I guess. So here we are, just working on our frontage here, and we're using a multitude of these classical highlight pieces, basically. So we got two clocks there, either side of what is going to be a little bit of a design that I use just by merging a few of these structures together. Now, one thing I don't normally experiment with a lot that I think I could do in future is just colouring some of these a little bit differently. It's just a shame that some of these natural pieces like the concrete and things, I much prefer to have them in their natural colour rather than playing around with a multitude of different colours. But that's something that I will be seeking to change in the future. So I just wanted to make these some sort of little design here that kind of highlights the station and just is a little bit of a centerpiece for the actual station frontage here. Because we do have a lot of nice things that are kind of on the interior, but at the moment there's nothing that really says, look at me, I'm a really nice looking station. And this ended up being a little bit more elaborate than I wanted it to be, because we got to remember this is the station for the Old Town Farm District, and it's ended up being a little bit more of a little classic old town station. I kind of wanted it to resemble something more of like a cargo train station or something, but it's not kind of worked out like that. So that's not really a problem because I'm really happy with how it looks. So we're bringing in our mulch now, and this is going to line the path and hide those little curbs that we have in the actual, the paths that lead up to the queues and the exit from the train station itself. Once that's all covered up, we come in with some nice fencing, again using the new world fences here because I think they look really nice, and they're one of my favorites if you're just looking to put in a quick fence. But we overlapped these a little bit so the metal pieces were hidden. I left the metal pieces exposed on the actual front of the station, but everywhere else it's completely hidden, and that includes going into our station itself, where they line up really nicely with the actual station gates, and we continue that all the way along the back here. I then flipped these and used them to line my mulch here. You can just see it in the background there, but we're going to start working on our foliage for this section now. And we're trying to use all of the basic European foliage stuff again. I was going to put down my little blueprints here, but they didn't work out because they are massive and they don't quite fit in the station. So I'm going to show you a little swatch of the foliage decoration here. It's all very basic, lots of bushes and stuff, just to really try and cover the mulch as much as possible. I don't like to show it too much because it overlaps quite drastically and it doesn't look amazing, but I really like to just get it down there and then start covering it up with foliage and stuff. So it's a lot of greenery. Periwinkle flowers feature quite heavily here because they're small and they really do give you a good amount of coverage on the mulch. Twin flowers and a lot of the basic kind of grassy and grassland textures and stuff. You can see us putting in some daisies. We then get poppies and a lot of buttercups and stuff. So it really has this thick coverage of vegetation, as if we've put down those, you can get those seed planters that you basically, you get a bunch of wild seeds and you throw them in your garden and just let them grow. Very low maintenance. So that's kind of what I'm looking for this. Like, we've just had those packs and just thrown them down and let the wildflowers grow. And then we've got a little bit of weed coverage from bracken and stuff, and a few little stone items as well. I then came around and put in a load of larger plants, mainly these twin flowers here, you can see, looking really nice, and some tree ferns as well. You saw me put them in earlier, and then again it's coming back in with our meadow plants and some little bushes. Wanted to put in a few olive trees as well, just because I think they give a nice little pop of a different kind of green. You can see here we've got quite a lot of the same green with just little pops of colour throughout, and I wanted to put something that stood out a little bit more. Common saltworts fast becoming one of my favourite green pieces to use because they have a really nice texture to them and they sit really nicely in any habitat. But the bracken here, I wanted to do a nice little coverage of that just so that it really stands out and thickens the foliage coverage up. I then put some azaleas in around the back of these lion statues. Now that might make you think I'm going to be putting lions in here for our next habitat, but we're not. But it is cat related, and it's not just one species of cat. I really want to finish off the Old Town Farm District, and that's what we're going to do next episode. We're going to put in 3 new habitats in one go, but they're going to be very basic. To do that though, we have to finish off a basic structure on this building. Now, we did do this last week, we did a little bit of work on it, but it's not finished. This is actually the stable that you're looking at right now for our Somali wild ass. You can check that video out if you go back to last week's episode. But for now, we're just going to continue fleshing this out. It's not going to be complete. Like I've said, I plan on doing a detailed episode later on where we actually finish off the interior of this building and make the exterior look a little bit more detailed, because at the moment it's very, very basic. But I did want to get the timber framework put in here that would add the exterior supports to the rest of the building. I'm also thinking about changing the roof because I think that corrugated iron is looking a little bit, it's not as decorative as I would have liked, especially on a larger building. It would work great on like small sheds and stuff, but it's not what I'm looking for this building, so we're going to need to make an adjustment. Next, we started just adjusting this barrier here because this is going to be the first new habitat, and then later on we're going to put in some fencing and stuff, but this was a little bit finicky, and I didn't realise it was actually, I thought it was because of where the path was, but it's actually because I haven't set this as a null barrier. So as soon as I changed it to a null barrier, it fit in perfectly where I wanted it to be, and I could put the doorway back in place here, and then just realign it, get the door put in, and we're good to carry on. Then we null barrier all the way around here, making our first new enclosure. Now this enclosure is going to be for the Fusa, which is our first small cat. Yes, this little area here is going to be a small cat sanctuary. It's going to feature the Fusa, it's also going to feature the Eurasian lynx, and there is one other animal, the caracal, which is going to be the final small cat that we're going to put in this little sanctuary right at the back of the Old Town Farm District. Now, the actual chain link fences that we're going to be putting in, you'll see them a bit later on, but they're not going to stay. We're going to make some adjustments to them next week, and we're going to change them around a little bit, just so that the style's a little bit different and we've got a bit more variation on them. I really like the fence that I do end up designing though, so it might just stay in as like a structure, but we'll be using some faux rocks or something just to really flesh it all out and make it look a little bit less like we've got a prison at the other side of the Old Town Farm District. But before we do all that, we need to finish off this detailing. So again, we're continuing our Arctic wood theme, which contrasts really nicely with plaster and the European brickwork here. So it's a bit of a go-to for me, and I really like how it all looks. Once that was finished, we just needed to add in an extra topper here because this roof is flat, and I'd like to put a little bit of fence on it. And when we do the detailing here, we might actually put like a roof access on here so that staff have somewhere to come and chill out and look over the habitats that are in this area. I think that would just be a nice finishing touch, and it would maybe distract from the roof there. But we can also put on like a staff ladder so that our keepers or mechanics have access to the rest of the roof if they need to make any repairs. All that was left to do before we put in our new fences though is to add a little bit of foliage in here just to really finish it off. I then extended the cobblestone wall here as well, and it just kind of finished off this little area and the staff entrance for this actual auxiliary building here. But you can see as we're putting stuff in, we need to continue adjusting the terrain, and a little bit of painting was done here as well, just to get it all up to scratch. Every time you put down the null paths, it seems to give you a sand texture on the bottom of it, which I don't particularly like. Anyway, once that was done, we moved our cobblestone wall a little bit here. I've yet to put this on the workshop, but if I can get these next 2 episodes done before I go away, I'm going to put a few items on the workshop for you so you can actually download them and put them in your own zoos. I have been promising this for a while, and I keep breaking that promise, and I am so sorry to do that, but I will. I promise I'll get something put up there as soon as possible, and I do plan on doing a big stream where we kind of take a look around, and you guys will be able to suggest blueprints and I'll make them live, and then at least we are doing something together and I'm not getting distracted by a multitude of other things. So the great thing about these walls is you can take out some stones and make them look a little bit dilapidated and like they're crumbling a touch, and I did that right here. We then came into this one and just gave it some parity and symmetry by moving it into position so that it backs out onto that wall. Final adjustments to our foliage here, and then we can move on to our next segment, which is going to be designing the remaining barriers. So this habitat is actually going to be for the caracal, and I wanted to make sure that I had enough space for these guys to reproduce a little bit, but we also need to bear in mind that we may put in other habitats for these 3 small cats in other areas. I then ran this path all the way around so that it could circle around, and it's going to get bigger. It's going to get wider as we kind of move into the main path here. And that's just so that I can filter the crowd out gradually and create just a nice space that it doesn't look like it's large, but it's going to kind of... I'm not explaining that very well. Basically, what I want to do is merge the 4-meter path that runs all the way around the shoreline there with the 8-meter path. And I always think when you go straight from a small path to a very large path, it looks really janky and horrible. So this needed to have a bit more of a gradual increase in the width of that path before it finally merges with the main thoroughfare. So we're just getting a nice little look there, and we're now going to move on to our new fences. Now these are very basic, it's just using the mesh and some metal, but we are probably going to make some adjustments to it. I'd like it to have a nice bit of variation whilst maintaining that fence, because these cats are going to be able to jump, they've got some climbing requirements and stuff, and I wanted to make sure that it was filled in nicely and we could prevent them from escaping, and all of the usual management tools that you need to kind of put to use to stop any of these animals getting out. Unfortunately, that means we are going to have to use these fences, but what I might do is replace certain sections of them with glass so that guests can have a nice viewpoint or we may make some nice little structures that allow a nice open viewpoint for our guests whilst maintaining a basic level of security so that our animals can't escape or get hit by a train as it comes past. So yeah, this was a little bit difficult, but we managed to get everything lined up, and you can see I'm just using exactly the same fence throughout, and that's basically going to give us a nice finished object for our final bit of Old Town and the farm district. I had planned on doing some different farm animals here, like you can see the goat that the Darl sheep was going to come into Old Town Farms, but I'm actually going to put that in our mountain biome very soon. I just thought having like a multitude of farm animals in this one district wasn't really working. Like, we've got the fox sanctuary, so why not have a small cat sanctuary here as well? And we can kind of pretend that this farmland has now been turned into a conservation area. Like, we already have the bat barn, and I explained in that episode that a lot of bats in the UK are endangered, so if you do find them in a house or somewhere where you want to develop, you can't actually develop until the bats have moved on, or they are provided with an alternative kind of living space so that they can safely evacuate where you are before you start building. Anyway, yeah, so I wanted to make this a bit more of a conservation area, so we put in these cats here, and I think that's going to be a really nice change. We are just coming around to the end, but I wanted to show off finishing off the actual route for our fences, and then we're going to go into a little bit of a cinematic tour. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one. It's been a little bit of a quicker build today, and it's not as expansive and detailed as normal, but I want to make sure that I'm continuous with my content, and you're getting at least one video every week of Planet Zoo, which is why we've kind of done a really quick development here to get one more residual building done, and then we're going to be able to do 3 habitats in one episode next week. Now, it's all going to be about detailing. So anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoy this little snippet of our new train station, and I will see you next week. Goodbye.